I begin by asking you to close your eyes for a moment and picture a kindergarten classroom. 25 eager five-year-olds fill this room. They're running, laughing, running around as much as they possibly can, and finally find their space down on the carpet where they anxiously await to learn something new. Can you see them? Now shift your focus to the doorway, where 5 or more students stand outside, peering through the glass. Their tiny fists bang desperately at the door. They're crying, pleading for the same chance to learn, but no one turns, no one opens the door because no one is paying attention. Now, open your eyes. This is the reality for far too many students in our communities who face barriers to education because of race, poverty, immigration status, language access, and disability. And excluding students doesn't just harm those that are left out. It strips away the shared growth of equitable educational systems and learning environments. And it's important for us to understand that equality is not equity. Equality gives everyone the same thing. Equity gives everyone what we need to thrive. And learning that difference has been a lifelong journey for me, shaped by my own family's experience. These are my parents. Aren't they cute? I was raised in a multiracial home. My dad's of Western European descent, aka white, and my mom's Latina. And like most mixed families, sometimes kids present differently. I, obviously, inherited my dad's lack of melanin. But growing up, I learned and saw that the world treated my family differently just because of the color of their skin. Watching racism and prejudice as a child permanently leaves a mark on you. It also allows you to see the world through a very different lens, one where privilege opens doors and another where identity shuts them. But my dad taught me very early on that the color of my skin came with responsibility, and I needed to use that privilege to fight against injustice, not just for my own family, but for everyone. And nowhere did I see inequity greater than in the education world, where doors that flung open for me slammed shut on the people that I loved. And that is why I became an educator, because I wanted to make sure that no child was ever left outside the door, because my mom was one of them. For 20 years, I taught in public schools where students thrived. They had access to everything at their fingertips. And I've also taught in others where lack of funding and support stifled potential, where teachers had to buy basic supplies like calculators or pencils and keep food in the back of their classrooms so their students wouldn't be hungry. And time again, I learned a devastating truth, that a child's future is far too often determined not by their brilliance or their determination, but by their zip code. In the US, students from under-resourced communities face barriers to an education system that wasn't built for them. They are more likely to attend schools that are underfunded, with lack of resources, outdated materials, inexperienced teachers, and disproportionate disciplinary policies. And this is not done by accident. It's by design. Have you ever wondered why so many of our communities are still so deeply segregated? That inequity is rooted in redlining, a racist housing policy that denied Black and brown families homeownership and generational wealth. Today, because our schools are still so largely tied to local property taxes, those same red lines still exist, creating divisions and exclusions for our students. And we can't forget the generational harm that this has caused so many students and families over the years. This is why it is so important for us to understand our history. It's not optional, it's essential. We have to be able to confront the truth of our past so that we can make systems that serve every child. And we saw educational inequity laid bare during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know, as much as we would all love to forget it, it was a shared crisis that showed the deep cracks in our system. On March 13th, 2020, schools nationwide shut down, but some pivoted quicker than others. My school district was able to start in 2 days after the shutdown. But when I spoke to my friends in my former district, they were dealing with laptop shortages, spotty internet, lack of tech support, no resources, and their students were juggling caregiving or grieving as their families faced frontline devastation. And students with disabilities lost critical support for months or even years, hindering their learning and growth. And you might ask, what's the difference? Why did these two places in the same area have such different outcomes? Zip code and neighborhood wealth. And families, for the first time, those who had maybe taken access to education for granted, got a glimpse of what it was like to have the door to education shut in your child's face. But for some, it wasn't new, but it became impossible for all of us to ignore. According to research by economist James Heckman, every $1 invested in high-quality early education for students from under-resourced neighborhoods yields a $7 return in better health, higher wages, lower crime, and better educational outcome. But funding isn't the only answer to educational equity. Kids have to be able to see themselves in the curriculum. They have to feel a sense of inclusion and belonging. Culturally responsive teaching is an instructional approach that recognizes the importance of using cultural references in all aspects of student learning, making those lessons more relevant and affirming. Zaretta Hammond, one of the leading voices in the field, found that when students see themselves, truly see themselves in the curriculum, something transformational happens. They lean in, they ask more questions, and they achieve more. I was fortunate to learn this early in my career. As a second-year teacher, I taught in a cohort where all the teachers shared students. And I taught U.S. history, and I met an incredible young person by the name of Calvin. Calvin was so bright and funny and sharp-witted and pretty shy. Calvin also happened to be Black and have a learning disability. When Calvin started to struggle in my classroom, I reached out to the other teachers in my cohort because I wanted to know what the best practice was so that I could help him. What I was met with is not what I expected. One teacher told me, "Well, can he even learn that material?" Another one said, "I don't know, he's pretty much a disciplinary problem, so he'll probably be gone soon." Say what? I was shocked, to say the least. Actually, I was pissed. Like, how dare they not see the potential in this kid, this beautiful young person on the precipice of life? And I also, when I started to understand the system better, I realized that it just wasn't built for Calvin or any other kids like it. So I made it my mission that I was going to create spaces of inclusion and belonging so that kids like Calvin and others felt safe in my classroom. And that came to fruition with Calvin about 3 months into the semester. I had assigned a presentation for the students to do during our civil rights movement unit. And I'm going to be really honest, I was scared because I feel like Calvin 3 months earlier would have rather bitten his arm off than done a presentation in front of his peers or me. But he got up in front of the class, toes down, and blew us all away. He was talking about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And he had even found that some of his distant cousins had participated. So he saw himself there in the curriculum. And as the students were cheering for Calvin, I was in the back crying because I was so overwhelmed with the potential and the beauty of what I saw in front of me. But the thing that will stay with me for the rest of my life and ultimately shaped the rest of my career was what Calvin said at the end of his presentation. I've never seen myself or my people celebrated in class before. It's always shackles and chains. But that's not our story. And he was right. Too many of our classrooms are still focused today on a narrow worldview, where Eurocentric perspectives, and we tout as the norm white middle-class America. Our children don't see themselves in the curriculum. We have to change the way that they see themselves every day. And we have to create inclusive spaces where they're celebrated. Every day in my classroom, we used to say a mantra. I am motivated. I am inspired. I will learn. I will fake it until I become it. And above all else, assume nothing. Because every student has a story we can't see. I had the privilege and honor of having a group of students with me for 2 years. And in 2017, when they were about to graduate, I had invited them over to dinner to celebrate. I cooked, they ate, we laughed, we ran around, they danced, we listened to music, we played games competitively. But what will stay with me and really cemented how I felt about these kids was what happened at the end of the night. They wouldn't leave. Like forever. They lingered. Oh my goodness. And around 9:30 at night, I went, okay, y'all, it's time to go. I gotta put my kids to bed. And as they were leaving at a glacial pace, like teenagers do, I stopped a couple of them on the outside of the door to say goodbye. And I jokingly said, why did you stay so long? And very quickly, one of the kids said, I don't know, Miss McKinney, I guess it just feels like home here. Well, that'll get you in the feels. Earlier that same year, one of my students told me that they had never seen their histories or culture or religion celebrated in class before, or even talked about for that matter. One student told me, Miss McKinney, I never wanted to share about my people or my culture before because it didn't really feel safe. But that's not what this is. Thank you for finally seeing me. Halal Al-Yen said that the world you make unsafe for other people's children is the same one your children live in. Don't we want every single child to have access to a fully funded and equitable education? If you agree, then the time to act is now. Parents, treat every child's education as if it were your own, and build communities of belonging for the educators that show up every day for your kids. Policymakers, fund and allocate schools' resources equitably and responsibly and not according to neighborhood wealth. Withholding funds from kids is an economic and moral liability. Community members, act and vote like every child's future depends on it, because it does. Former students, lead with love, act with purpose, and know that I will always believe in you. Educators, I'm speaking directly to you now. I see you, and I know the struggle is real. But I ask you to champion truth and culturally responsive curriculum so that you can see and celebrate every child in your class. And please, don't forget to take care of yourselves. You deserve the same respect, honor, and compassion that you extend to your students every day. And just that is an act of resistance in a system that often demands your silence. But we can no longer be silent. And don't forget that when educators stand firm and center equity in their classrooms, they pay the price for it. They are often silenced, run out, or have to leave the profession altogether. I was one of those teachers who centered equity, inclusion, and belonging in my classes. And after 20 years in the classroom that I loved, I had to make the choice to walk away. But my commitment to students has never wavered. I stand here today for the truth, for the students, and for the future that we all deserve. I began by asking you to imagine a world where we had a fully funded and equitable education for every child. Think of that now. And think about the child that represents your why. No closed doors, no barriers. I walk through this work for my children, for my nieces and my nephews, and for my mom. I ask you to stand with me today to break down the doors of injustice so that every child can walk through, be seen, and live to their fullest potential. Thank you.